everyone, I'm the Tax Pro, and today is day 2 of 90 days to taxes. Today we're going to talk about registering your business, so registering with the IRS, with the state, etc. How do you register your business? When do you know you need to register it? And how do you start a legitimate business with the IRS? I see this question a lot from new business owners where they say, I have no idea how to start. I don't know where I register this business. I don't know what to do. Okay, so let's kind of back up and talk about state registration first, because state registration has to happen in order for IRS registration to happen a lot of times. So when it comes to the legal formation of the company, you need to determine what your legal structure is going to be. And I can't really talk about that as an accountant. That's for attorneys, and I can get in trouble for providing legal advice without a license. So in general, I always say it's most important to go talk to an attorney and figure out, where are you most legally protected? What type of business do you need to form? At that point in time, you will form the business with your state, okay, or with the state that you choose to register in. You don't go straight to the IRS website to register your business. First step is legal registration. So are you registering as an LLC? Are you registering as a corporation? Are you registering as one of the other many entities that you can register for? However, in order to start a business with the IRS, you don't actually have to legally register your business with the state. You don't have to have a legal formation. You don't have to have an LLC. You don't have to have a corporation. There's no legal requirement to have a business with the IRS. There's no legal registration that has to occur at the state level, okay? So if you choose not to register your business with your state, from a federal tax perspective, that's fine. Now, when it comes to the state level, certain states may require you to get some sort of either legal entity set up or register with your state saying that you're conducting commerce in the state. Okay, and that's gonna vary state by state. So from a federal tax perspective, you don't actually have to form a separate entity like an LLC or a corporation. From a state legal perspective, you may need to register with the state, even if you don't plan on forming an LLC or a corporation, okay? State selection happens first. Then we need to look at whether or not you need to register from a tax perspective with the IRS. So we talked yesterday about the 4 different types of tax treatment when it comes to businesses. When we look at registering with the IRS as an entity, okay, as a business, you get what is called this employer identification number, or an EIN. If you are taxed as a partnership, if you are taxed as an S corporation, if you are taxed as a C corporation, you have to have an EIN. You have to have an employer identification number. Okay, so if you are an LLC with 2 or more owners, you're automatically a partnership. You have to have an EIN. Okay, if you are a corporation at the state level, you've formed a C corporation from a tax perspective on the federal side. You have to have an EIN. In order to make an S corporation election, you have to have an EIN. The only type of business that does not need an EIN are sole proprietorships. Sole proprietorships are not required to get an EIN unless that sole proprietorship is going to be employing employees, W-2 employees, okay? Employees that you're actually running through payroll. At that point in time, you have to get an EIN. There's some confusion, and I'll go over this in another video, about employees versus 1099 employees. Technically, employees are W-2, and 1099 employees, those are contractors. So if you have true employees that are receiving W-2s, you have to have an employer identification number or an EIN, okay? The only type of business that does not need an EIN is going to be a sole proprietorship that does not have W-2 employees. Now, if you are in that position to where you're a sole proprietorship, so you're either an LLC with a single owner or you just don't have like a legal formation, and you have one owner, you're a sole proprietorship, you're not required to get an EIN. I recommend getting an EIN to protect your social security number, because when you go to fill out a W-9, you have to put either your EIN or your social security number, and then you give that W-9 to companies that you do work for and or to payment processing platforms. And I don't like my clients to have their social security numbers and handing them out to companies they do work for. I don't like you to give out your social security number. It's a security issue. I'd much rather you give out your EIN, okay? So it doesn't hurt to get an EIN as a sole proprietorship. You just don't need it unless you have employees. So let's talk about the EIN. You Google get an EIN, you're gonna get all these paid services in order to register for an EIN. You don't have to pay for it. You can actually apply right online. So you can go in and you can apply online. You can apply online or you can mail in the application form. So this talks about you need an EIN if you have employees, will need to pay employment, excise or alcohol, tobacco, and firearm taxes, or if you withhold taxes on income other than wages paid to a non-resident alien. If you don't need an EIN for federal tax purposes, you can still request one for banking or state tax purposes. Okay, so you can get an EIN if need be. Okay, let's look to see, okay, so before you apply, it's gonna tell you you need to form your entity first. So you need to create that legal entity, okay? Now, you can apply online with this link right here, or you can fill out this form. And this form is gonna show you all the information that the IRS needs to assign you an EIN. Go ahead and look through this form if you wanna file online. When you file online, it's really nice because you'll immediately have your EIN number issued to you, and the certificate, like the EIN letter, will automatically generate. Save that letter. You will need it for the life of your business. That every year you're gonna need to, provide it somewhere, whether it's opening a new bank account or something along those lines. Save the letter. So this is the SS4. And what the SS4 does is this is the application for an employer identification number. This is gonna show you all the information that's gonna be asked when you apply online, okay? So you're gonna need to go through and you're gonna look to see what is applicable to you, okay? Lots of information here. And it's gonna ask you information, maybe it's not on the SS4, it's online. When you go to fill it out online, you're gonna see it's gonna ask you different information about different types of taxes. Okay, make sure that you understand those questions, that you answer them accurately. I have had one individual come to me, filled it out wrong. I don't see it very often, but I did have somebody that came to me that had filled it out wrong, and she generated, like the IRS was looking for all these different taxes because she just kind of answered these questions in a rush. And she triggered the IRS looking for specific tax returns. So it's definitely something you can do by yourself for free online. Just make sure that you're answering the questions accurately, and if you don't understand, don't continue forward, right? This person that came to me, like the IRS was looking for excise tax returns and all sorts of stuff on her business. Once you get your EIN, look at your EIN letter. It is going to tell you what tax forms the IRS expects from you, okay? Most people don't read their EIN letter. They just look at the EIN assigned and they're like, oh, great, I have an EIN now. And they don't actually read the letter. The letter will tell you what returns the IRS is expecting from you. Pay attention to that. If the IRS tells you on there, hey, we're gonna expect a Form 1065, and you never file a Form 1065, the IRS will come knocking eventually and ask for those back taxes. Okay, those back tax returns. You have to pay attention to what the EIN letter says. But this is how you register a business with the IRS. You get an EIN. This registers the business with the IRS. Okay, so it takes care of your federal tax registration, your EIN number. Now, when it comes to state level, you may need to file and register for specific types of taxes. So common types of taxes that you may need to register for at the state level are going to be things like potentially income tax, but oftentimes sales tax. You will need to register for unemployment. If you are going to have W-2 employees, you'll need to pay into unemployment. You'll potentially need to register for payroll accounts, right? So if you have W-2 employees, you're going to need subsequent payroll withholding if your state has withholding. Some states don't have an income tax, so you may not have to register for a withholding account in those states, but you will need to register for an unemployment. Workers' compensation, I've seen small businesses that have come in that don't have workers' comp and they've gotten in trouble. Workers' compensation, certain states, the way that you register for workers' comp can differ. So we have something called monopoly states, and monopoly states are where the state requires you to go through the actual state itself for workers' compensation. And then we have other states where you can actually get workers' compensation policies through an insurance carrier. But there are certain states that we call monopoly states, and they require you to go through them for your workers' compensation. Ohio is an example of a monopoly state. Okay, in the state of Ohio, your workers' compensation is through the state. It is not through a separate insurance carrier. So if you're going to end up with W-2 employees, you need to have workers' compensation set up. So that's another registration. If you have a special type of tax due to your industry, then you would need to register for those specific accounts. And where you register is going to be dependent on the type of tax. Okay. So that's the state level. Now you may also have taxes on the local level. And if you're in specific cities, in general, we see, if you're in a specific city that has a tax, obviously you want to register with that particular city. But what a lot of people don't realize is that their business may have what we call nexus in other states and cities, counties, etc. And that nexus creates not just income tax, but sales tax and other types of tax requirements in those particular states, cities, etc. So for example, if I have a business in the state of Ohio and I sell nationwide, eventually I may hit nexus in other states, and I may end up having to file tax returns in maybe Virginia or in Kentucky or California. And so you may end up, even though your state or your business is located in a single state, you may end up having to pay taxes in other states. Okay? So you want to pay attention to, if you're traveling to other states, you need to look up their nexus requirements to determine if you need to register in that state. Okay? If you are in, like for example, I'm in Ohio, and in Ohio we have local taxes, and we have a lot of businesses where, especially if they have multiple locations or if they travel, they may have tax requirements in multiple cities. Okay, and then they have to register in all these different cities. Payroll is the same way. So in the state of Ohio, we have to register in different cities for payroll taxes. And it's a pain. So make sure that you know on the federal, state, and then local level where you need to register and what taxes you need to pay. Main things to be concerned about are income tax, sales tax, employment tax, and then any sort of specialty tax based on your industry. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you guys tomorrow.